Hey there, welcome. I'm Amrita from Artria Jewelry. Today we are going to learn how to make 4 styles of fancy headpins. This one right here is the tight coil headpin. This one is a looser coil or a double coil headpin. This one is a bubble headpin. Then this one is the double bubble headpin. I do have a video on my YouTube page that shows us how to make a pair of earrings using the double bubble headpin. That's my cat. He's joining us a little bit. He's feeling a little chatty right there. And you could use that technique with any of these headpins to make your jewelry. Tools you will need: a ruler, a flush cutter, a bent nose or chain nose pliers, needle nose or chain nose pliers, so you need 2 pairs of pliers, and then a round nose or a 6-step bail making plier. I like the 6-step looping pliers because then my loops are more consistent, so this is what I'm going to be using today. You will need 20 gauge copper wire or 18 gauge copper wire to make these headpins. So for the first style, we are going to make these tight coil headpins. So you have 2 options. You can either pre-cut the wire and then make the coil and you have your headpin ready, or you could work off of the spool. If you choose to pre-cut the wire and you want a 2-inch headpin, then I would cut a 3-inch piece of wire so that you can make the coil. This uses about 1 inch, and then you'll have 2 inches up here. I'm going to work straight off of my spool, that way there's minimal wastage. Flush cut the end so it's flat, and then take the smallest step on my looping pliers and make that initial loop. So twist your wrist once, you get a U, and then turn it again and you get a closed loop. This is called a closed P-loop. I'm going to slip the pliers back in there and slowly turn it one more time to make sure that the wires line up. And then I'm going to switch to my needle nose or flat nose pliers and continue to turn the wire, the loop, such that these are really closely lined up. So that's what gives it that tight loop. And I'm going to go all the way up until the end of the wire coincides with where this comes out. And then I'm just going to hold, you can continue to hold it and use your nail and bend this up so you get it centered. So now I can measure out 2 inches from the top of that fancy portion and where I want to cut the wire. So there I have 2 identical tight coiled headpins. For the second headpin, this is the looser coil, large coil headpin. I'm going to continue to work off my spool, but if you want to pre-cut your wire, you will need 4 inches of 20 gauge wire or 18 gauge wire. I'm going to again start with flush cutting the end and then start the first loop. So the initial P loop. And here, instead of lining up the wire close to the original, close to the initial wire, we are just going to make a loose turn. And then I'm going to switch to my flat pliers and continue that and close it out. And at the top of that initial loop is where I let the wire touch. You can choose to keep it loose all the way around. I'm just going to touch it here, and then you can even use your thumb and forefinger to turn it because it's pretty easy to do that at this point. And then once I get to the top of the loop again, I'm going to just straighten the wire, bend it back so we have a nice centered loop. And then I'm going to measure out my 2 inches and make the cut. For this next loop, we are going to make the bubble loop, and that's what I call it because it reminds me of a little bubble or a balloon. And to do this, we're going to use the wrapping technique to wrap the loop. So this will make it more secure. So if I was going to make earrings out of this, I could turn this into a loop and hook it to ear wires and dangle a bead or a pearl from here. And that would make a great pair of simple earrings as well. So we are going to want 2 inches for the top of this bubble for the head pin. And then we're going to leave about 1/8 of an inch for the wrap. And then the rest of this is about an inch. So what I'm going to do is do 2 1/8 of an inch. And at that point, I'm going to make a bend in my wire. I'm going to take my 5th step of my looping pliers and hold the longer length. So here's the wire we just measured out. And I'm going to turn this loop around that 5th step. So we kind of have a large loop right here. And then I'm going to switch to my pliers to hold that loop in place. And I'm going to make 2 to 3 wraps. So that's 1 wrap. And that's 3 right there. And then I'm going to snip off, flush cut facing the side of your finished piece. Snip off that wire and tuck it in. And you can just use your pliers to flatten that. And there, we have a bubble loop. For this last style, the 4th style of head pin, we're going to use the same technique we used in the simple bubble, but to make a double bubble. For this double bubble head pin, you're going to need 4 1/8 of an inch of the copper wire. So I'm going to measure 4 1/8 of an inch. And you can cut the wire at this point, or you can work off of the spool. So I'm going to work off of the spool. I'm going to flush cut the end, and then you're going to measure 2.1/8 and make a bend at that point. So that's going to be the main part of your head pin. And then we are going to take the first step of your looping pliers, hold the wire at that bend, and make a small loop all the way around. Okay, so that's your first loop. That's that inner loop right there. So now once you have that initial loop made, I'm going to use my fingers to hold that loop and gently turn the wire to shape this larger wire around that smaller loop. And you can use your pliers for this. I just find it easier to control and do it with my fingers, and it gives it a more organic look and feel. And you can adjust the size of the loop that you want with your pliers. So if you want a larger loop, just move that open and you get a larger loop like that. Now once you have that bubble made, so that's the double bubble, you're going to hold the whole set, so both the loops like that, with your pliers, and you're going to wrap the wire around. So that's 1 wrap, and then once you have that 1 wrap, it's easier to just wrap it another time. So that's 1 2 3, and I'm going to snip off the excess wire with the flush end toward my finished piece, and then use my flat pliers to tuck that in. And there, I have the double bubble head pin done. I hope you enjoyed making these fancy head pins with me, and that you will like, subscribe, and share, and I will see you again next week.